Now it's time to explore the cool town of Glen, and look at that old drinking pub over there. Boy, if that's not an Old West saloon. Jack London Park, and it's kind of a spread out affair here. We're not going to probably be able to do everything. It's a very dry scape up here at the park, and this was Jack London's home and beauty ranch. So it's a state historic park. And the first thing we're going to do is go up to the museum here and check that out and see what that's like inside. This shows you a lot of books that he was a very prolific author. Amazing number of books. for magazines. Those are all first editions. Must be worth a fortune. Manuscripts. He actually was on a ship for quite a while, sailing ship. Ship called the Snark. And of course he wrote a book about it. That's a shame. He built a place called Wolf House. Big place, and just when he was getting ready to move in, it was destroyed by fire. We're way up in elevation here, and there's absolutely no water around here at all. What a shame. And there's the ruins there. Here's a very interesting letter to the lawyer talking about how he spent so much money in 1913 and then the fire came. Says he's very busy and he says no drunken sailor ever spent money as more lavishly than I have. Been pulled to spend it in the past several months on law and lawyers in a battle line that ensnarled the globe. Every copyright I possessed was attacked, and I was being robbed by pirate motion picture companies, not only of motion picture rights to my stories, but of took flight translation rights, dramatic rights, everything was being, he was being challenged with everything, reprint rights, everything. He says, believe me when I tell you I'm still licking my financial wounds. By the opening months of 1914, money will be pouring in. But I haven't $1,000 in cash right now that I can rationally afford to pay. The proper function of man is to live, not exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. What do you have there, Missy Jenn?
This is the model of the ship, the Snark, and the Londons actually owned the vessel, and it was created after the poem in Lewis Carroll's, yeah, Alice in Wonderland author, yeah. The Hunting of the Snark, and in 1909 they were all getting ill, and then they were forced to sell the Snark in Sydney, Australia, and nobody knows what really became of the ship after that.
Yeah, it's like the story I'm already putting together on this guy is that his expectations were so high, and then illness just dashed him at the end. I mean, and from the letters I showed, he was under attack by lawyers, motion picture companies, copyright people, reprint people, dramatic use people. I'll tell you, even back then the lawyers were going crazy and stuff, and he was just pouring money into defending his works. And by 1913, he really couldn't even scrounge $1,000 up to take care of something he owed. So it's no wonder he got kind of sick, and then by 1916 died at age 40. But you can see his hopes were high, but it was kind of a life of tragedy at the end there, because he picked up all kinds of diseases in his travels, and it wasn't so much his diseases as kills him as the cures, the so-called quack cures that were tried. So very interesting. It's interesting looking at his first rejection letter from a publisher of the Bulletin. He says, "I just wrote a story traveling 2,500 miles up to the Yukon and all my tales and everything." And the publisher wrote back, doubtful about Alaska, has lost interest. He's saying the country's really lost interest in tales of the gold rush and all that stuff. Well, little did he know that that work, Call It a Wild, would go on to be his greatest success. Kind of interesting. And just as a postscript, for those of you who don't think that persistence pays off before becoming a success, London received over 600 rejection slips. 600. Sadly, too, during the Russian-Japanese conflict, I think it was 1905, he was actually put in prison by the Japanese, and that really negatively affected his health. He was writing for the San Francisco Examiner at that time. There's his journal, the New York Journal, actually, and there's his armband that he was required to wear. Just an incredibly fascinating person to have crammed all of that into 40 years and so many books. Making our way to the second floor here, he loved the South Pacific, particularly Hawaii and Asia. He brought these mats home with him, so let's head up here and take a look. Jack London was a socialist at heart, and he believed that, as he was raised as a dirt poor orphan, had no money, or just illegitimate child, just a really terrible upbringing. And he thought if we could just share the wealth, how much better the world would be. But then he really was a rugged individual too, and he had to reconcile individualism against that collectivism. And he struggled to reconcile those two philosophies together, and I don't think he ever did. I asked the woman downstairs if he was a religious person, and she said no, he was an avowed atheist until about the end, when he wrote a book, I can't remember the name, Star something, where he got very metaphysical and questioning things. But a very, very conflicted life too. We made it back to the rancho just fine. Unfortunately, our last little snippet of video from the road, I guess it was too hot inside. It was like 118 degrees in the rig where the GoPro was mounted for the dash-mounted camera, but I guess it just overheated, so we didn't get that last snippet, but we made it home great. Hope you enjoyed the tour, a little bit about Jack London. I tend to go for the unusual when I go places. Yes, you can look at the massive scale of the house, the huge stones that are in the construction. the massive doors, and but they're really sparse homes on the inside. There's not a lot to them. A couple bedrooms, just a massive sort of great room, and then a lot of day beds by windows. You know, very modest living. These were people that you could tell, the Londons, Charmian and Jack London, these were people that really enjoyed traveling the world, and their time at home was very minimal. At the end, when they wanted to go on a 7-year adventure around the world, of course, the trip only lasted 27 months because their health had deteriorated. Being in the tropics and being in the Pacific, you're subject to all sorts of diseases. And given Jack London's past exposure and mercury poisoning and other diseases he contracted, he was imprisoned by the Japanese for photographing, as they say, for taking photographs of places that should not have been taken, military installations. He went through more in 40 years than most of us will go through in 3 lifetimes. He lived life up to the handle fully, and as he says, his quote said on the wall, I'd rather be dead than not live a life that's full of action and fulfillment and adventure. And for 40 years he certainly portrayed that. He left an incredible mark on literature, and as I said at the very beginning, as America's true adventure writer, a writer that dominated the early 1900s with his books. I also found it fascinating that he had over 600 rejection slips, and yet he still kept at it before he ever really became well known. Why? Because he had a passion for writing, and it showed. And it was only a matter of time. He knew, and he kept at it because he knew his stories were adventures. They were exciting, and he knew if he could get enough of them out there, they would sort of catch fire, the genre. And well, as the docent at the place told me over there at the Jack London's house, he was one that was very carefully, he stage managed his name very well too. He managed his fame and everything, despite the fact he was spending more than he was taking in. He was such a prolific and popular writer that he never seemed to ever worry about that cash flow. Yeah, he was pinched once in a while. He had to fight lawyers and royalties and all the stuff. And I found that really fascinating, legal entanglements and things. But yet to him, living life was the key. So I was very inspired by his story. And I felt how apropos was that when we're just getting ready to start our adventures and fulfilling my life's dream of seeing something in life. Yes, I've been in Asia, but I've worked hard and done a lot of hard work and fulfilled a lot of responsibilities to other people. And I'm excited to think about traveling and kind of taking that Jack London model. And well, if something does eventually bring me down on the road, that's a heck of a place for it to happen. But as he might paraphrase, better to have lived and lost than to not have lived at all. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our 2-day adventure. Jen and I sure loved bringing it to you. She was a trooper. The rig performed beautifully. I've learned some things in this initial go-round. We're going to be doing more trips to San Francisco, other places, for overnighters, and well, we certainly feel like we have the proper rig. We cooked our meals, we did everything. We enjoyed our journey, and best of all, we enjoyed that visit to London House to learn something about a truly great, if short-lived, American. Best of all, you were welcome. Thumbs up or appreciated. Thanks so much.